But Jackie Bailey, I'm so glad to have you here. She's in one of our books, and I just love her message and her story and what she does. And you're talking all about, speaking and leading. So the words, "Don't tell anyone," silenced Jackie at the age of 8. 15 years later, she saved a child by speaking up. Known as the International Conversation Coach, Jackie inspires clients to break their silence and become victorious over trauma. She's the founder and executive director of the Speak, Feed, Lead project, which has empowered hundreds of children, teens, and adults with confident, courageous voices shared on global stages, competitions, podcasts, and books. Jackie is a 2015 semifinalist in the World Championship of Public Speaking, a TEDx speaker, a best-selling author of 6 books on topics ranging from leadership, healing, communication, and parenting, and the co-host of Life Mastery Radio with Todd and Jackie. As an award-winning team builder, educator, leader, and coach, Jackie has been a featured speaker at corporate events at Microsoft, Smith Barney, Puget Sound Energy, Fred Hutch Cancer Care Alliance, and at mega events like the Voices of Women Summit, Family Matters Summit, Health, Wealth, Wisdom, and the Best You Expo, where she shared stages with Marissa Peer, Mas Sajadi, Bernardo Moya, Bill Wash, and Kim Serafini. Jackie, excited to hear what you have to share today. The title of your talk is The 5 Codes of Conversation for Personal and Business Branding. The stage is yours, and can't wait to hear what you have to share.
Thank you, Linda. And what a great lead up you had this morning in talking about engaging with people on social media and otherwise, because when you think about it, every pivotal moment in whether our personal or business life started with a conversation. And yet, the internet and social media oftentimes is a barrier with real conversation. If we're holding a device in front of us while we're talking to someone, we are literally putting up a wall, and unspoken body language says, I'm really not that interested in you. So today I'm going to share with you some ways that conversation had an impact on my life and how it now impacts the lives of my youngest clients, which are age 10, as well as my adult clients, and how you can make important pivotal changes in your personal and business life just by remembering the 5 codes of conversation and applying them daily. So when I was a child, as Linda mentioned in my introduction, I lived in an abusive home, and I was silent until it became necessary for me to speak up to save the life of another child who was going to be abused. And I started a conversation by saying, I have a secret I need to tell. That started a conversation that began my healing process. When I began therapy, one of the first conversations I had with my therapist after spilling my guts about all of the abuse I'd suffered as a kid, she started a conversation by asking, do you think you can forgive? And I just about laughed in her face, because at that point, everything was so painful. How could I possibly even imagine ever doing that at some point? But she told me that if I didn't actually work toward being able to do that someday, that I wouldn't ever fully heal. So the third very pivotal conversation I had then, about a decade and a little bit over that, after I had that conversation, was that I was able to start a conversation with my abuser and say, I forgive you. Conversations are pivotal. And even when we are speakers on stages, the best speakers I've ever seen are those who have a conversational tone and a conversational air. So with that in mind, I'm going to teach you what I teach the youngest kids I work with. I already mentioned they're age 10 and up, and they've learned these 5 codes, and they will come back to me and say, Miss Jackie, I made 5 new friends this week because I did what you told me to do. And I started conversations. Just recently, I had an adult client who's only worked with me for just a few weeks, and I gave her some tips about how to converse better in business. This was a person who is an immigrant to the United States, so English is not her natural language, and she's in a workforce now where she often has to step back because she doesn't feel confident sharing her ideas because of the language barrier. And many, many times she told me, other people take credit for my great ideas because I'm just not strong enough to stand up. After just a couple of times working with her and giving her these tips, she is beaming. In fact, she told me 2 days ago, she said, "You'll never guess what I did. I am not looking for a home right now to purchase, but I went to an open house just so I could have a conversation with a total stranger, that real estate agent." And I was so proud of her because she was doing something completely out of her comfort zone simply because she found confidence to do something that we all do all the time. And yet, unfortunately, sometimes we do it poorly. So let's start with our personal life and our personal branding. How can conversation help that? Well, I'm about to teach you these 5 codes. And if you'll play with me a little bit toward the end, I've put them in sort of a little military ditty, especially for the kids, because we teach them at camps. And I hope that you will think about remembering them easier by using this little military ditty. But first of all, the first code of those 5 is that you need to address the other person by their name. I know this isn't going to be like Thunderstrike, a magnanimous, kind of thing. But when you use somebody's name to address them, first of all, you get their attention. They look at you, and now you can make that connection, like Linda was talking about, that engagement that's so necessary. So address them by name. And that Dale Carnegie said in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, probably written almost 100 years ago. I haven't checked, I forgot when it was actually published, but I think it was close to 100 years ago now. And he even said in that book that our personal name is the most beautiful sound in any language. That when other people use our name, we have that trust that comes out. We have that like for them, and it's respectful as well. So when you're about to talk with someone, it could be someone in your personal life, a spouse, a child, a parent, anyone, say their name, get their attention, and then begin that conversation on a stronger note. So the first rule, the first code is to address them by name. Secondly, then, is making eye contact with them. That doesn't mean you stare them down, but by your focus being on them in that moment of time, they're going to, again, feel that deeper connection with you. They know you're listening. I don't know about you, but I've been in conversations with people when they've asked me a question and I respond with an answer that I think is brilliant. And yet they're looking beyond me. They're looking around, they're looking to see who else is in the room. And I immediately feel like I'm not being heard. Why should I keep talking? Because they're someplace else. If you've ever experienced that, put that in the chat. Like, put a number 1 in there to simplify things. Put number 1 if you've ever felt like you've been talking to someone and they leave you, right? It's not a good feeling. So I ask, why would you want to put someone else into that emotion if you can avoid it? And it's really easy to avoid it just simply by focusing on them, keeping eye contact with them. And when you're in an online setting like this is a little bit counterintuitive, but when you are speaking as a speaker online, you don't look at your audience. No, you don't look at your audience. You actually look at the camera of your device, as I'm doing right now. And I'm hoping that because I'm looking at the camera of my device, you actually do feel like I could possibly be looking at you. And everybody feels that I'm looking at them and I'm making that connection even through the airwaves or whatever you call them. Okay. So that's an interesting little dynamic that you need to be aware of as well. When you're listening, you can look at the speaker, but when you're talking, you need to look at your camera. All right. So address them by name, make eye contact. And the third code is really commonsensical in the sense that if questions aren't being asked, it's not really a conversation. Right? So the third code is to ask questions, but not just any questions. A lot of times my young students will say, "Miss Jackie, I walk in the door and my mom says, 'How was your day?'" She's scrolling through her phone and I know she's not really listening to me, and that's not really a question that she wants me to answer. So I'll just say, "Fine, whatever," or I'll even just go, "Eh." And I get that complaint from the parents too. "Why isn't my kid talking to me?" Well, it's because you've taught them well. You've taught them that you're not listening to them. And why would they open up to you if they know you're not listening? So the right kinds of questions are important. Instead of asking, how was your day, which is really general, it's a courtesy question. We do it as we're passing people on the street or in the hallway or at work. It doesn't have any sense to them, to that person who's hearing that question, that you really want to know. So why don't you ask a question that's really valid? And why don't you start a conversation with something like, hey, what's been the best part of your day so far? Do you have plans for this fabulous weekend coming up? Changing the question changes the conversation and makes it more pivotal for both you and the other person. And you can do this in your personal life as well as your business life as well. And you're going to make friends. You're going to be more trusted. Now, after you ask questions, which is code 3, now your ears kick into gear. All right. I believe that we have been given 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason. I believe that we should be listening twice as much as we are speaking, because I don't know about you, but I have never really learned anything by speaking. I only learn when I listen. So if number 3 is to ask the right kinds of questions, then number 4 is to listen for keywords. Listening for keywords. What are keywords? These are words that you're going to use to further the connection with the person you're talking to by using back the words they've just said. And to make it easier, I suggest you listen for nouns, people, places, or things, or you listen to emotionally charged words. It doesn't always have to be I'm sad or I'm excited, but it could be that was the best day. I loved this day. Listen for those sort of emotionally charged words or nouns, and that's what you can use to reply with. For instance, if you were to ask your friend, who did you have lunch with today? That's a great question to ask. It's going to start a conversation. And they say, I had lunch with my best friend, Joe. Now, there's a couple of directions you could take. You could take Joe, which is a noun, and you could say, oh, Joe, Joe who? Or tell me which Joe. Or what do you like about Joe? You could take lunch and you could say, what did you have for lunch? Was it good? Did you go to that restaurant down the street for lunch? You could use lunch back because that's another noun. Or you could take that word best friend. Those 2 words together really denote something emotional. They denote a connection. So you could ask, what is it about Joe that makes him your best friend? We can do this so simply with our kids, but and this might be an unconscious thing that the person you're talking to hones in on, but when you use the words they've just used in a question back to them in your response, they know you're listening. And they will not only feel acknowledged by you, but they will build trust and respect in you. And isn't that what we all really want? So say their name, make eye contact, ask the right questions, listen for keywords. And the 5th one, which is really not exactly a rule, it is a code, but it's most important, not just to conversation, but to everything in life. The fifth one is it's not about you. It's just not about you. When you are having a conversation with someone, you need to make it about them. You need to make them feel acknowledged, important, and valued in your eyes. And if you have the most exciting news to share, you wait until they ask you, so what's going on with you? And then you can share. But first of all, it's not about you. You make it about them and you make that person feel important. This works with kids. It works with adults. It works in personal branding because you're going to build relationships with people. Part of my personal branding is based on that conversation I had with my therapist years ago when she asked me if I thought I could forgive, and I laughed in her face, and then was able to actually have a conversation that started with, I forgive you. That's part of my personal branding. My keynote speech is about forgiveness. My life is built on the love I have for myself, that I was able to forgive myself, I forgave my abuser, and we both lived happily even after. That's actually one of the titles of my keynote, Happily Even After. all of the trauma that we face when we can forgive. So that's part of my personal branding, and it started with a conversation. Now, when you go in your business branding, these codes, they're still applicable to you if you're speaking on stage. Think about that. You want to address your audience. You want to know a little bit about your audience before you get on that stage. And if they're an audience of dog groomers, if they're an audience of spiritual minded people or publishers or authors, you need to address them that way. And you need to know a little bit about them. Not necessarily always can you ask questions, but you can have some information stored up, having looked at the company's website or something like that, knowing what their core values are so that you could talk a little bit their language. And you want to make eye contact with them. That's the second rule, right? Address your audience, make eye contact with them, not scanning the room, but picking out a few people on the third, fourth, or fifth rows and spending a little time with that person, connecting with eye contact, and then moving on to the person next to them and talking a little bit more. Okay, so making eye contact even in a live audience situation. Asking questions. That's a great way to start a speech or a presentation, is to find out a little bit more about your audience. How many of you like pizza? Linda says, how many like which type of chocolate? Is it dark? Is it white? Is it milk chocolate? That's a great way to start a conversation with people. You could do that with an audience, right? Make it relevant to what you're about to talk about. That could be helpful. And then listen to some of the responses you get, but also, as I mentioned before, those keywords should already be in your presentation. Keywords that are going to resonate with them, your audience, whoever they are. If you're dog groomers, you're not going to be talking about scientific stuff. You're going to be talking about clippers and scissors and, whatever, shampoos. Okay. So make those words, those keywords relevant. And then remembering always that as a speaker, when building your business brand, it's not about you. Your role as a speaker is to give your audience a gift. So you can tell these incredible stories. When I give my keynote speech, I talk about my childhood abuse. And I get a little bit deep and dark with that. But I always bring the audience up and I give them a gift to say, when you are faced with this, or the next time you have to do this, or when you're ready to start that conversation, this is what you can do. This is how you can turn my tragedy into something inspiring for you. That gift makes it not about you. And every time you speak, you should make sure that you have that gift. It's for the audience. You're giving them something. So here's the little military ditty. And I hope this will help you to remember our 5 codes of conversation for both personal branding as well as your business branding. Here we go. Say their name, I's the aim. Not every question is the same. Listening for words is key. Remembering it's not about me. So with that, Linda, I don't know if there's some questions. We can all do that together, but sometimes we cancel each other out if we all unmute. But I want you to remember that fun little ditty, because it will help you in those important, pivotal conversations you need to have. You'll be able to start them correctly. You'll be able to keep that engagement and make that connection, build trust, rapport, and you'll be more profitable in your business, but you'll also have better, stronger relationships in all of your personal life. So Linda,
Can you share the ditty one more time?
Bet. Okay. Say their name, I's the aim. Not every question is the same. Listening for words is key. Remembering it's not about me.
I love it. I love it. And I love you're even you're really into it, That's fantastic. First of all, I did look it up, and 1936 is the year that How to Win Friends and Influence People came out. Yeah. So amazing how a message carries on forever, because that's a really good message, and communication. And if you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. It is so good. So I'm curious, related to the five steps that you give. Now that's related to speaking, but also related to conversations, like you mentioned, the kids and for adults as well. What do you do when you're in a situation when you have both people know these techniques and they both know it's not about them?
Right.
Because I had that happen once where it's like we were both trying to make it about the other person.
Right.
And I was like, okay, let's stop here. Let's figure out, like, what we're really trying to do here,
Right.
because we were both focusing on the other person, and it really made it challenging to have a conversation.
Actually, when my kids do this all the time, so I do teach kids that are young, and I teach them these skills, and actually have them practice this. And when they both know how to do it, it creates a really interesting conversation because one person will ask a question, the other person will answer it, but meanwhile, the first person is listening for keywords, and so
Right.
they'll be asked a question back, and they'll say, "Yeah, I really like dark chocolate too. So when you eat dark chocolate, is it da 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 da?" And you can stay focused on the other. You're giving a little in answer to what they're asking you, but you're also giving a little bit more and giving them a question that lets them know you're still interested in them. And it works really well, actually. And you can do that with an audience and workshops. That's the beauty of conversations, right? And they're all different every time you do them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I made this, I remade this. What is your favorite? Dark chocolate, white chocolate, milk chocolate. But that's what she's referring to for those who weren't here at the beginning. So it's interesting because conversations, I've been in conversations where they didn't have any interest in me at all.
Mm,
And I left the conversation where like they spoke 98% of it, because I actually my Fathom keeps track of percentages, and it said 98% of them, 2% of me.
wow.
And so as I left the conversation, I had two thoughts. So first thought was that, wow, I'm a great listener. That was my, like, I wanted to go there first, right? And then my second thought was that, wow, they weren't interested in me.
Right.
And I've heard this saying, be the most interested person in the room, not the most interesting in person in the room. And the most interesting, like they're interesting more to themselves, right? So, so this
Yeah.
is a great
But
topic. I
it
think
says
it's
a lot about people, right? It's like if they're not really interested in you, then learn what you can about them. Maybe it's going to be to your advantage at some point, but if they're not
yeah.
interested in what you're doing, then it's not a relationship you really want to pursue anyway, right?
And that was a great takeaway for me, is that this is not a person that I would want to, participate in the things that I'm doing, because they're not about my audience, they're about themselves. And
Right.
that, so it was a great thing to walk away from. Now you do have a free gift, and your free gift is happily even after. Why don't you share with us what that is?
Yeah, it's a quick little downloadable e-workbook. I mentioned my story a little bit and how I learned to forgive through that abuse. And so it talks a little bit about that, but then it also gives the reader real good advice on how they can empower themselves to start having those conversations that matter.
Fantastic. And do you have a VIP gift too? I didn't write that down. Do you have a VIP gift? Do you
I
remember?
do have a VIP gift. It is a recorded 6-part series in which I interviewed 6 communication experts about how to be present on our stage of life. So it's actually called Being Present with Your Stage Presence. And I talked to an FBI guy who learns to read faces, to someone who helps us understand our saboteurs and ways that we can communicate. So that's available as a VIP gift.
Fascinating. I love that. Thanks for taking part in this summit. And I love your message. I think it's very important. And what I love about your VIP gift is that I think a lot of times when we're speaking at these events, we think it has to be all about us, all about us. But what you did is you brought some really brilliant information from other people and are offering that as a VIP gift. So I think that's fabulous. And Sarah is going to drop a link to the VIP gift. If you guys want to upgrade, please click that link and upgrade today. Thank you so much, Jackie, for being part of the summit. Truly appreciate you and everything that you do to get people to help them to get up there on stage and to speak their truth.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share my voice today, Linda. I appreciate that as well.
Yes, of course. Of course. Thank you. Wow. That was great, you guys. What kind of takeaway did you get from that? I got some really great ones. Really sometimes it's just a reminder of to listen, to just listen. And I have to remind myself, when I go into conversations, that I'm here to hear what they have to say. I'm here to hear their message, because when we listen, we can better serve them. And so what I'm listening for when I'm in a conversation with somebody is, who can I connect them with? Who can help them to get to that next level? That's one of the things I'm really, really, truly, truly listening to. I make a lot of connections. I'm known as a connector. And so making those connections, the listening piece is something I had to learn to do, because I used to just blab, blab, blab all over the place without even thinking about what I was saying or who I was speaking to. And so learning, it's a skill that you can hone in on. And that's what what I'm learning to do, still learning. I'll keep learning until the day I take my last breath,